What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Global Gaming Network channel, where we have the pleasure and opportunity to go over everything to do with esports across the entirety of the globe. We got plenty to dive into on today's episode. Without further ado, this is Today in Esports. What's going on, everybody? Thanks so much for joining us on this fine day for Today in Esports. As always, my name is Andy. Joined with me is Chris. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. We're on the eve of everything starting back up, but Call of Duty Major 3 qualifiers are starting up, so let's take a look at those standings before we go into the weekend here. All right, taking a look at the standings before we go into the qualifier for Major 3, the top 8, we have Atlanta FaZe leading the pack with 330 points. LA Thieves are sitting in second, Toronto Ultra following in third, Carolina Royal Ravens in fourth, Vancouver Surge in fifth, Optic Texas in sixth. In seventh, we have Boston Breach, and in eighth, Miami Heretics. Now, these bottom four teams have to be a little careful and have to start winning if they want to possibly make it to champs. We have in ninth place, C9 New York, in 10th place, Minnesota Rockar, in 11th place, LA Gorilla Mates, and in 12th, Vegas Falcons.
There are no more minor tournaments, and there are only 5 qualifier matches for the last 2 stages before champs. So there's only so many CDL points to go around, and teams on and or off the bubble will be chomping at the bit for points where they can find them. With all of that being said, there's tons of Rostermainia to talk about going in towards Major 3 qualifiers. As we already talked about, through the halfway mark, a lot of the teams are underneath the magnifying glass to make these changes ahead of Major 3 to make a dent in the standings so that way they can at least qualify for champs. Let's take a look at some of these Rostermainias and the changes along with them. Starting off with Optic Texas. I already talked about it on Monday's episode. However, gotta state it again, Pred is out, and now we got Hook back in. Hook was one of the statistical leaders for this team back in Major 1 qualifiers when Pred was absent on this roster, as well as them playing with Kenny instead of Skies. But it's still something to be talked about given that they were the #1 seed going in towards that tournament for sure. LA Gorilla Mates are also making an official announcement for their change. Prisa is officially gone from the roster. Lindsay is on the bench. And now they are officially announcing they are playing with Ojani as well as Fella. Fella, you might remember from last season, played with the Carolina Royal Ravens alongside Gwyn and TJ Halley as well as Clayster. Ojani, on the other side, had some stints in the league previously, playing when Legion was known as Paris Legion, as well as just recently won the Challengers Open in Texas, playing underneath the OMID banner. Miami Heretics have also officially announced that they are bringing Super in towards the roster. We've only seen Super play a single CDL match so far, but dropped a bombastic 1.0 plus KD across all of the maps that were played. So it should be interesting to see how the Heretics do look going forward. And then the Vegas Falcons. Who saw this one coming? Well, a whole bunch of leakers if you're in the know for sure. Pred is officially on the roster, but there's a lot more rumors behind of what the roster might actually be. Pred, of course, will be joining Exit as far as their SMG duo, has already come to Twitter alongside his thoughts when he did announce this on his own stream as well, to say that he's pretty happy about the changes and he's pretty hopeful for the future for this roster. Some other rumors for the changes would be Prista, as I talked about, just recently got dropped from LA Gorilla Mates, as well as Arcides, who was a part of that team with Ojani that just won the Texas Open and Challengers for OMID. Now, let's transition over towards the schedule. As Chris already said earlier, we have Major 3 qualifiers. They're getting back underway. We will see the new Vegas Falcons underway versus the Vancouver Surge on Friday, as well as the Rocker versus Optic Texas, Atlanta FaZe versus Ultra. Saturday, we'll have Miami Heretics going up against the Vegas Falcons, Gorilla Mates taking on the Ravens, Cloud9 New York, Optic Texas, as well as the Ultra going up against the Breach. And then finally for Sunday, we'll have Minnesota Rocker going up against Boston, Atlanta v Carolina, and then the rematch from minor to tournament again. It seems to be the El Clasico, Vancouver Surge and Los Angeles Thieves. But the matches I'm going to be keeping an eye out for is the Minnesota Rocket versus Optic Texas. Now, I didn't fully talk about them during Rostermainia because it wasn't fully confirmed yet, but let's be honest. Kenny is announced he's going to be on the roster. He's going to be playing up against his old team of Optic Texas. And it should be a fun one. I mean, Optic, with all these different roster changes, they don't have a map pool yet. Kenny's joining a system that does work with a core 3 that already has a map pool, so it should be interesting. I'm not going to lie. I think that Minnesota will probably end up winning this series 3-1. Next one, we're going to jump over towards Saturday, will be the Los Angeles Gorilla Mates versus Carolina Royal Ravens. Are you catching the hint that I am going with as far as the narratives for this weekend? We have Fellow going up against his former teammate of Gwyn and TJ Halley, the organization that he played with all of last season, as well as for the EWC. So it should be a really good time. New Gorilla Mates in action. Catch me sitting down watching that one. I am definitely excited for it. And then on Sunday, like I talked about, seems to be the El Clasico over the past 45 days at the very least. Vancouver Surge versus the Los Angeles Thieves. Now, LA Thieves do have the one up over the Vancouver Surge with a qualifier win 3-0, and then a Map 7 and a Minor 2 tournament win over Vancouver Surge. But Vancouver just bouncing back from a Grand Finals appearance where LA Thieves were nowhere to be found as far as Major 2 is concerned. So I'm hopeful that the Vancouver Surge might fight back against the LA Thieves as we have Dealership into the mix. Rewind Search and Destroy is around as well. Neptune's been looking really good, and I think that the LA Thieves are feeling nervy post Major 2 performance.
Well, there you have it. We have the roster rundowns as well as some of the key matchups, but I'm ready for my favorite part going into the qualifiers. What are the proper picks?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was already talking about the schedule. My picks, I got Vancouver winning 3-1, Minnesota 3-1, and then Toronto 3-1. Always like to give the benefit of the doubt that maybe they might lose one map, but Saturday, I got Miami taking a 3-2, very hopeful what Super brings for that team. I actually do have Carolina Royal Ravens. I think that they will win it if it goes map 5, so that's where my safe pick does come through. Cloud9 should be winning 3-1, and then the Ultra, easy peasy. They're a top team in the game right now. They should win 3-1. And then Sunday's the interesting one in my opinion. I got Boston actually winning 3-2 versus their opponent, and then Atlanta winning 3-1 naturally versus Carolina. Regardless of them testing map pool, I still think Atlanta are the better team. And then LAT, it's online, and I just generally think that they'll have Vancouver's number again. I just want to see what those two look like on land.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to it, and make sure you drop your predictions as well, and if you agree or disagree with Proper over here. But we're going to go ahead and swap over to League of Legends and take a look at what's going on in the Rift. Jumping into the Rift, though, we will be beginning with some League of Legends this weekend. LTA North and South will be beginning. So we're going to take a look at some of those teams and what matches to look forward to going into this weekend. Starting with some key matches in LTA North, we will have Team Liquid facing off versus FlyQuest. These are two of the top teams in the league right now, and they'll be facing off in the post-lane swap meta, so we'll have to see how they affects them going forward. The next game on Sunday, we will have Team Liquid versus 100 Thieves, who they played twice and split one in the first matchup. 100 Thieves did beat Team Liquid 2-1, but in the cross-conference championship, Team Liquid would get their revenge and beat 100 Thieves 3-0 to make it the first stand. So we're going to look out and see how Team Liquid does in their week 1 matchup.
That's just as far as LTA North and South is concerned. Now, I understand as far as League of Legends is concerned, it's happening all the way across the globe, and we got some action happening for LEC that is happening here in North America in the early bits for us across the weekdays. They already had matches happen on Monday, right?
They did, and as he said, we are jumping into week 2 for LEC, so those matches already happened, and we did have some upsets, but let's go ahead and look at what happened on Monday first before we get into that rundown. Monday, we saw BDS versus RGE and SK versus Fnatic. Fnatic won their first match versus GX on Saturday, while RGE lost their first match against Heretic. Both BDS and SK would be playing in the first match as well on that Monday. Starting off with BDS versus RGE, Rogue would win game 1 in a solid performance from ADC Patrick on the Ezreal, who ended with a 6-1-3 KDA, but soon would get shut down by BDS in games 2 and 3, where jungler 113 would end the game 2 with a 10-2-8 KD on Nidalee, and a solo performance from Ice would go 11-1-6 on the Jhin to end out the game 3, giving BDS a 2-1 win over Rogue and a 1-0 start for the split. Now, looking at the key matchup from Monday, we're looking at Fnatic versus SK. Fnatic was a front runner for going into split 2, but SK seemed to have some different thoughts on that going into their match. We would have game 1. SK would actually control a majority of the game, where members were going deathless across the board. They only gave up 2 total kills to Fnatic in the 31-minute game. RKR would go 2-0-8 on the Jace while doing 22.9k damage to champions. In game number 2, Fnatic had control for most of the game, but with defeat almost certain for SK, they would take a 4v fight on the Baron, where they would actually end up killing 4 members of Fnatic, and with 2 towers already down in the mid lane, they would march down the mid lane, win the game, and take a 2-0 victory for Fnatic. The player of the series was the jungler Budaka, who played on the Sejuani and Vi. Great job by him to help lead the team Fnatic was considered to be one of the top 4 teams going into the split for EMEA, and then losing to SK, who was at the bottom of the table for most people's predictions, had the biggest upset that we've seen so far. Looking at some key matchups though, for Saturday for LEC though, we'll have G2 versus Team Heretics, and then on Sunday we'll have KC versus Fnatic. We'll have to see how those games go and see if Fnatic can get back into their winning ways, or if KC will continue the run that we saw them since first stand tournament. Now let's take a look at the schedule going into the weekend for LTA North, South, and LEC. So starting off with the week 1 matches for LTA North, on Saturday, April 5th, we'll have Team Liquid versus FlyQuest kicking us off, followed by Shopify Rebellion versus Dignitas, 100 Thieves versus C9, Leon versus DSG. On Saturday, we'll have C9 versus Shopify Rebellion, TL versus 100 Thieves, FlyQuest versus DSG, and Dig versus Leon. Going into the LTA South matchups, we have PNG versus IE, Leviathan versus Furia, we have FX7M versus Vikings, and Red versus Loud. On Sunday, we will have Furia versus IE, Vikings versus Red, FX7M versus Leviathan, and Loud versus Pain Gaming. For LEC, matches also start on that Saturday as well. We'll have Rogue versus Vitality, KC versus BDS, Team Heretics versus G2. We only have 2 matches on Sunday and Monday. Starting with Sunday, we have SK versus BDS, Fnatic versus KC, and then rounding out again on Monday, RGE versus GX, and Heretics versus Koi.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for all the updates as far as the Rift is concerned. Now let's keep our focus as far as Riot is concerned, but a little bit more tactical over towards the FPS for Valorant. Starting off with the Americas. Here for VCT, we're going to be covering everything to do with Americas and EMEA, but most importantly, keep in mind that we are on the road to Masters Toronto, the next major championship for Valorant is about to be getting underway in months to come, and they're currently playing through regional action. Let's get into the Americas to start things off. As far as the standings are concerned, you do have 6 teams that are split into 2 separate groups respectively, 6 teams in Group Alpha, 6 teams in Group Omega. We're mostly going to be taking a focus as far as the 2 teams that made Masters Bangkok, and that would be Sentinel sitting 1-1 in Group Alpha, and then G2 Esports sitting in Group Omega. But you can see that there's a lot of discrepancies as far as the group standings are concerned. Crew Esports are undefeated in Group Alpha, and G2 Esports are not alone. Cloud9 are also undefeated. Some big insight coming through from last weekend. Crew Esports beat Sentinels 2-0, just plainly put. A 13-7 on Lotus and a 13-8 on Icebox. And they let them absolutely have it. I mean, there wasn't a single player that you couldn't talk well about when it came down to Crew Esports. I mean, Bazino went 40-26. He was quite impactful on the Breach as well as the Harbor. Then you also had Kesnick going AWOL on the Jet, as well as Yara, who went 42-27 across the entirety of the series with a 76% KASC. That is simply nuts. Sentinels look uncomfortable in each of the second halves of that best of 3 series, and they're looking for a bounce back coming in towards week 3 versus Evil Geniuses. EG, on the other hand, is looking for a bounce back themselves. They just lost to 100 Thieves last week 0-2, 10-13 on Fracture and a 7-13 on Haven, thus making EG 1-1 in Group Alpha. And if Sen is that weak, then Evil Geniuses are going to be able to take advantage of this with a week 3 win. G2 Esports is back in action this upcoming week. They're going up against NRG, but they played MIBR awkwardly close. Some would say scarily close, considering the fact that G2 Esports just got 2nd place at Masters Bangkok. They had to work hard for that series versus MIBR, losing the map 1 in OT 12-14. The other 2 maps were super competitive, minus G2's attacking half in map 3. NRG, on the other hand, their 1 loss came to Cloud9 in week 1, albeit taking a commanding map 1 win on Lotus 13-6. NRG also had a week 2 win versus Furia, where they lost the Lotus map 1 10-13, but annihilated Furia on the last 2 maps. So you take that information for what it's worth. It's still going to be a really uphill battle for NRG, but we're so excited to see them compete against G2. And the final matchup to definitely keep in mind on is definitely going to be that MIBR match. They're going up against the undefeated Cloud9. As mentioned, MIBR, they look incredible versus G2 Esports. They are America's #1 after all, and they are currently sitting 1-1 in the group post their 1-2 loss. They have a week 1 win versus Leviathan. Aspas returned to top form versus that series in G2, where he went 57-49 with 141 ADR. You're going to need all of that plus some more when you're going up against Cloud9, maybe. They only have 1 map loss the entirety of this group stage so far, and it was that loss to NRG. It was 6-13. They have a 2-0 win versus Leviathan in week 2, and we thought it was going to be competitive. It simply was not. So has this team really been tested yet? I would argue that they probably haven't yet, and this is going to be their most competitive series so far. And I think MIBR, coming away from that G2 very competitive loss, are going to be prepared to knock Cloud9 down a peg or two. So here is that schedule as far as the weekend is concerned. We got Evil Geniuses, like I was talking about, taking on Sentinels. I'll be keeping a close eye on that series. 100 Thieves should have an easy win versus Loud. 2G on Saturday going up against Crew. Crew should have that one in the bag. And then G2, I'm taking a look at them going up against NRG. But on Sunday, Furia versus Leviathan could be a Burger Bowl pillow fight type deal, but I'm not too sure who's going to come out on top of that one. And then Cloud9 versus MIBR. That's going to be an absolute banger at the end of Sunday. Should be a fun one. That's all we got for Valorant Americas.
And switching over to EMEA, we did have some matches actually begin yesterday on Wednesday, so we'll go over those as well as what are the key matches to look up at the week. Starting with yesterday's match, we did have Team Liquid versus BBL. The Week 2 match kicked off yesterday. As I said, Team Liquid ended up losing 2-1 versus G8 in their matchup, and BBL ended up winning their matches versus KC 2-1. Map 1 would start with TL's picks going to Fracture and them opting to start on defense. Team Liquid's defense was just about all they could hope for. They would start the map going 9-3 before swapping to attack. They would ward off the 9-3 curse, and then they would find the final rounds they would need to end the map 13-7, playing them up 1-0 in the series. Map number 2, BBL's pick would go to Haven, and they would start on defense. Undeterred by their loss on Fracture, BBL would end the half 8-4 before swapping sides. They would then go perfect on attack, and they would get the 5 rounds needed to win map 2 13-4 and tie up the series 1-1. On to the decider map, Ascent. With the week 1 repeat possibly looming in the minds of TL, they would quickly show why they were one of EMEA's representatives at Masters Bangkok, where they would go a perfect 12-0 in the first half on defense. With their backs against the wall, BBL would try to battle out. They would win 4 rounds, but just wouldn't be enough. Where in round 17, Team Liquid would find the single round they needed to win the map to take the series victory 2-1, moving both teams to 1-1 record for week 2. Nats would end the series with 47 kills and only 34 deaths with a 149 ADR while playing Vice and Cypher. Looking at the second match from Wednesday, we are looking at Apex versus Navi. Both teams were coming off a loss in week 1 and would look to get into the win column for week 2. Map number 1 was Navi's pick going to Lotus, but Apex would lead the first half 7-5 before switching to defense. They would find the 5 rounds needed to win the map 13-10. Apex pick would take us to Haven, where Navi would find some momentum on attack and start the first half 8-4. Upon swapping defense, they would finally find the win 13-11 and tie the series 1-1. Going to the decider map, they would go to Split. Navi was fully in control of the map and would win 13-6 to win the series 2-1. Fluorescent would have an outstanding game in the series with 70 kills and only 44 deaths with a 174 ADR. Taking a look at some other key matches we have later today, the key match will be Foot versus Gentlemates, followed by that will be TH versus GX. And then on Friday, you'll want to take a look at Team Vitality versus Fnatic, followed by that will be Koi versus KC.
And that's all we got as far as VCT is concerned, though there are still a lot of matches happening that includes both the Pacific and the China region. So you want to make sure that you go over to any sort of channel that you could possibly find, or just stay here on the Global Gaming Network channel. We talk about all of the 4 different regions, most importantly on the state of. So you want to make sure you subscribe and get in the conversations down in the comments below. Who do you think is going to be making Masters Toronto sometime soon? But we're going to put everything on the shelf as far as esports are concerned. Now let's take a quick look as far as the news roundup is concerned. Blast Rivals has officially been moved to Copenhagen from Monterrey. 30 days before Blast Rivals event is actually announced that they are moving the tournament all the way to Copenhagen, citing logistical challenges going from Australia to Mexico. Attendees are upset as many have locked in their flights, they've booked their hotels, and they've purchased many different accommodations that now need to be canceled.
Dota has announced that they are making a change to their road to TI. We will see a Swiss-style stage going into the road to TI 14, so let's know what you think about that. Now moving on to something a little more traditional, G2 has announced that they are going to make their debut for their soccer club. Now we're going to take a look and see what they can do if they can win their minor tournament, making it to a major tournament, and how will they fare with their football going forward.
And that's all we got as far as the news is concerned. Did we miss anything? Make sure you guys are adding us on all different facets for social media and let us know down in the comments what you are most excited about when it comes down to the news. But as we're talking about now taking things back on the shelf, let's talk Counter-Strike. Blast had just concluded last weekend. Congratulations to Vitality. They went back-to-back tournament champions from ESL Pro League 21 into the Blast Spring Open 2025. The playoffs kicked off on March 28th, and it wrapped up all the way on March 30th, delivering 3 straight days of jaw-dropping Counter-Strike action. From underdog battles to a grand final from the ages, this one had it all.
The quarterfinals set the tone early. Team Spirit made quick work of Navi, sweeping them aside with ease before it even started. Meanwhile, Mouse delivered on expectations, dominating G2 in the match that showcased their superior firepower. No nail-biters here, just 2 teams asserting their dominance.
Which then brought us into the semifinals. Things heated up relatively fast. Vitality, the squad everyone's been watching, went up against Team Spirit. Vitality didn't blink. They swept Spirit aside with surgical precision, locking in their spot straight to the grand finals. Meanwhile, the other semifinal, Mouse battled Eternal Fire in an absolute slugfest. It was a back and forth, heart-pounding stuff, but Mouse clutched it out, earning their shot at glory. 2 teams down, 2 teams left standing.
Here it is, grand finals, and buckle up because Vitality versus Mouse was a 5-map thriller. Map 1 Inferno was a wake-up call. Vitality steamrolled Mouse 13-0. That's right, 13-0. A perfect game to remind everyone who's boss. But Mouse shook it off and roared back on Mirage, scraping out a 13-11 win after a nail-biter. They kept the momentum rolling onto Dust 2, taking it 13-11 again. Suddenly it was 2-1 Mouse, and Vitality's backs were against the wall. Title hopes hanging by a thread.
Here's where legends are made, though. Vitality flipped the switch on Nuke, powering through with a 13-7 victory to tie up the series. Then came in Train, the Map 5 decider. Both teams threw everything they had and the kitchen sink, but Vitality's composure shone through. 13-7, game over. Championship secured. That win marks their 3rd tournament victory in a row. Let that sink in. Vitality isn't just winning, they're dominating the scene like no one else.
But before we wrap up, a quick shout out to Team Spirit's Donk. His team may not have reached the finals, but this guy was unreal. A 1.44 rating, plus 104 KD difference, nearly 100 damage per round, and 302 kills across the tournament. He averaged almost a kill per round and had a multi-kill rounds near 60% of the time. Donk didn't get the trophy, but he's got everyone talking. What a way to cap off March Blast Open 2025, folks. Pure fireworks.
And with the conclusion of Blast Spring Season 2025, naturally the Valve Global Rankings got a massive shakeup. So without further ado, let's zip on over to the Valve Global Rankings and give you a quick rundown of how that looks now. Vitality, well, they're the new #1. After winning back-to-back championships, you'd imagine they would jump 2nd and 1st, and that is absolutely the case. Mals are now in 2nd place as they have beat Team Spirit not once, not twice, but 3 different times over the past 30 days. The Mongols slide all the way up into 4th, and rounding out the top 5, we got Eternal Fire all the way up to 5th. It's a new pecking order, folks.
Sad that the Blast Open is finished. Don't worry, action is just heating up. The next stop will be PGL Bucharest 2025, kicking off April 6th. This one is a 16-team Swiss-style showdown with the top 8 teams battling out in playoffs. A massive 625,000 prize pools on the line, and it all goes down from April 7th to the 13th. But here's the twist. Top dog Spirit, Vitality, and Mouse are all sitting it out, giving other squads a golden chance to shine. Want the full rundown? Stick around. We'll take a look at the schedule next.
The way that PGL Bucharest is going to be working is you want to win 3 series before you lose 3 series. There's a whole high and low as far as the Swiss format is concerned, but all of the matches are starting on the 6th of April, and here's what that schedule is going to look like. We got the Mongols going up against 3D Max. VP is in action. The Falcons will be taking on Complexity. G2 back versus Gamers Legion. Eternal Fire is going up against Pain. We got Liquid going up against Legacy. FaZe has a round 1 match versus Astralis, and then Furia will be taking on a PGL. So it's going to be interesting to be able to see how the entire tournament does conclude. Again, from all the shakeup as far as the VRS rankings are concerned, a lot of focus will be over towards IEM Melbourne, where all of the top dogs will be competing next. But the conclusion from this one should surely shake things up, even all the way up towards the top 5 global rankings. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. And let's get engaged together on the conversation across all different facets for social media. On behalf of all involved, this has been Today in Esports.